Hi, everyone. Welcome to the NLI USA Signature Speaker Series. I'm Adina Canefield, the CEO of NLI USA. The story of Passover is a story of redemption. It's a time that we mark no matter what challenges the Jewish people face, now and throughout history. I want to thank you for joining and learning with us today, even in the midst of great challenges in Israel and in communities in the United States and around the globe. I want to extend a special thank you to our featured speakers, David Moss and Dr. Chaim Neria, who are joining us for this talk today from Jerusalem. If a siren goes off, they will need to leave the Zoom, and we will, of course, pause the program. Our hope is that if there is a siren, they'll be able to return and we'll resume. If we are nearing the end of the program when the siren begins, we'll actually have to end the program at that time. In many words and many ways, this reality that we're in connects us to our collective past and to the story that we are here to explore today. The Haggadah has long helped place each generation's experience within a larger story of the Jewish people. And today, we have the opportunity to reflect on that tradition together. Please feel free to pose your questions in the Q&A, and those questions will be answered at the end of our program. With that in mind, I'll introduce our speakers and we'll get started. Dr. Chaim Neria is curator of the National Library of Israel's Judaica collection. He completed his doctorate at the University of Chicago. He also holds an MA in Conflict Resolution and Peace Studies from Notre Dame University. Prior to his appointment at the library, Dr. Neria worked for 7 years as chief speechwriter and head of strategy at the Office of the President of the State of Israel. David Moss has devoted his artistic career to reimagining Jewish ideas, texts, and values through a rich range of media. Among his many artistic endeavors, he revived the art of the handmade ketubah, wrote and illuminated the Moss Haggadah, which is now in the National Library of Israel's collections, and pioneered an architectural approach that turns Jewish institutional buildings into active partners in their community's mission. David currently produces limited edition works, travels for artists and residencies, and enhances Jewish life through creative programming. So David, let's go back in time and have you go to the beginning of this exquisite work. I want to have you share with us how this commission for this gorgeous Haggadah came about and the beginning stages, what you thought it would be and how things evolved over time.
Okay, sure. So the origin of this Haggadah is really the story of our family's move to Israel. My wife, Rosalind of blessed memory, and I were living with our young children in Berkeley. We had met in Israel, loved it, and had always considered living here as an option. But at one point, Rosalind said that we just needed to spend a year here to try it out and decide one way or the other and get it off life's agenda. Sage advice. I was working full time on reviving the art of the handmade ketubah. Each one took a month or two, but for a year project, I knew I needed something larger. Each ketubah only took me a month or two. I was always fascinated by the Haggadah, and I even wrote my senior thesis in college on it. I approached one of my collectors, Richard Levy in Florida, and proposed that I create an entirely handwritten, hand-illustrated Haggadah for his collection of antique artistic Hebrew manuscripts. He agreed, and that was the beginning of the commission. The only requirements we decided on in advance were three. One, that the book be of large folio format. that it be written on real animal parchment, and be traditional in style. Many of my previous works with the Ketubot were often quite modern and graphic. As the process proceeded, the book seemed to take on a life of its own as my research would spur an idea which I was then challenged to figure out exactly how to express. Now, because the project was so intimately connected with our Aliyah, and Aliyah means going up, I deliberately incorporated stair imagery at different points in the Haggadah. I'll show you a few examples if I can get my screen share to do what it's supposed to do. 1, 2. Is it working?
Yes.
Okay, good. In the section on the order of the Seder, Kadesh Urachatz, rather than writing the 15 steps downward or across, I depicted them as 15 steps of the Seder, as ascending stairs, with the Seder plate and all the other objects for the evening arranged in the center. See them going up from the right to left and on the other side as well. Then in another section, I noticed that the literary form of the song Dayenu, it would have been enough, is itself a stepped literary structure. So I wrote out the opening words of each stanza as steps. You see them going on the right, continuing on the left. Now, if you look at the bottom of the left-hand page, you'll see the end of the Magid, the actual telling of the tale. And I cut the bottoms of the pages one by one to reveal the steps of our journeys from slavery to freedom. Should I keep sharing my screen or try to get it off?
Are you finished?
Yeah, you can go on.
Go ahead. No, and I just wanted to hear from you a little bit about sort of from a feeling perspective, David. When you took this on, was it daunting? Was it, what was going through your head when this commission began and you first said, yes, I'll do it.
Yeah, great question. So I realized that I was doing something that had rarely been done for the past 500 years. Before Gutenberg invented printing, all books were made this way. One patron commissioning one artist to create one totally hand-produced manuscript. So I kind of imagined myself as a scribe from 1,000 years ago and wondered, was I the same or different? This became my manishtana moment of this project. How was I different or the same as a medieval Hebrew scribe? And this quickly morphed into another question. Are we as Jews essentially different or the same as Jews were 1,000 years ago? What do you guys think? Put your answers in this chat. Are we essentially different or are we essentially the same as we were 1,000 years ago?
I don't think the chat is enabled, but the Q&A is, so you can put your
Okay,
answers in the
well,
Q&A.
think about your answer. For me, the answer was yes, we are fundamentally different. And that difference is Israel. For they could only fervently pray for next year in Jerusalem, but we can freely settle here for the price of a plane ticket. And I knew that my Haggadah must somehow reflect this difference. And so, unlike my medieval colleague, who would have written every letter form, arranged every page, made every drawing, in a very local, vernacular, identifiable way, I deliberately made this a book of kibbutz galayot, of the ingathering of exiles, by incorporating textual and visual traditions from Jewish communities from around the world. For example, I chose the Ashkenazic text, but wrote it out with the Sephardic calligraphic style. Let me get back to my screen if I can. Share. Go. Where are we? I am screen sharing.
We see the image.
We see the image. On the page where we open the door, I've depicted typical Jewish homes from 20 different countries from around the world, each one with a tiny little open door. As the large door is opened, we glimpse some maps of these same lands. And in each little map, the text of that community appears in the language, but none of these are in Hebrew. Each is in its own vernacular Jewish language, like Yiddish or Ladino or Judeo-Arabic, and so forth. This is a page of ingathering. And throughout the book, I've drawn on traditions from around the world. This text, recited by Yemenite Jews and North African Jews, is from Maimonides' Haggadah, Bivhilu Yatzanu Mitzrayim. In great haste, we went out of Egypt. The page for the eating of afikoman is done in the style of Persian Kurdish folk art and is based on one of their afikoman traditions. The set table image recalls the format in which the temple implements were often depicted in medieval Spanish Bible manuscripts. So you're seeing I'm drawing on tradition, artistic and literary, from around the world. For the psalm, when Israel came out of Egypt, I show 600 tiny Jews marching out of Egypt. But each one is actually a musical note, and together they play out two traditional Mojitz Hasidic tunes to this psalm. Does that kind of answer your question?
That's amazing. Are we seeing that there were indentations, like musical notes on each person's head reached yeah.
That's the staff. That's the musical staff.
Wow.
So the heads are the notes, and the staffs in their hands are the bar divisions. Good question.
So I see, you've drawn on tradition and incorporated these incredible artistic elements. I want to hear from you, Chaim, a little bit. NLI has the largest collection of Haggadot in the world. I know that before we were preparing for this call or this Zoom, you told us that all of the Haggadot that are in the vitrines in the gorgeous exhibition hall of the library, as well as all of the treasures that were on exhibition, were taken down and taken underground into safe rooms. But I was hoping that you could give us a sense of those Haggadot, and how the Moss Haggadah reflects or is a part of that collection, how it's in conversation with the vast number of Haggadot that we have at the library.
So thank you very much. I just want to note that if you notice when in David Haggadah, when he spoke about the doors. So the main door is like the shelter door nowadays when we are going to the miklat. So I guess he will add a little bit how significant and actually meet our current situation his Haggadah even today. So speaking about the National Library's collection of Haggadot is considered the most comprehensive in the world. We have 15,000 and probably more magnificent and rare examples from different periods and from across the globe in more than 50 languages. So the 50,000 is not all the Haggadot that we have. They are in some sense, unique and rare. We have variety of traditional versions alongside modern and unconventional Haggadot or non-traditional Haggadot, Haggadot of destruction, some that were written, printed right before the Holocaust or during the Holocaust, and the Haggadot of compassion and redemption and returning to the land of Israel. Not only that, many of our Haggadot, they have themselves their own story, a story of survival, rescue, rediscovery, and eventually arrival at the National Library. And in our conversation forward, I will show two of these Haggadot, the Wolf Haggadah and the Rothschild Haggadah, that their story forms a story in its own right. And of course, we have among the treasures that we have is illustrated and early manuscript of Haggadot. We have the only surviving copy of the first printed Haggadah, and recently the Moss Haggadah. Now, what makes the Moss Haggadah, in my opinion, so important and so unique is that it's not only aesthetically beautiful, but it is a deeply interpretative work. The art is not just a decorative alone, but in a sense, it's a commentary, a visual interpretation of the traditional text. So through calligraphy, design, and image, David offers what I see a modern and very unique commentary on the Haggadah. Now, it's true we have many illustrated Haggadot and so on, but usually maybe the Jewish people are more tends to see things via text. And what David take us in his Haggadah is to different journey. And I think that placing this work in dialogue with the great illustrated Haggadot of the past and printed Haggadot and all our collection is something that contribute and give and add meaning and significance to the National Library collection of all many Haggadot. And like I think that David say by himself, it create Haggadah of Kibbutz Galuyot, which is by itself unique and interesting story.
And just remind me how many Haggadot approximately we have, and the oldest to the newest.
Okay, so I'm trying not to say number because almost every year we get thousands more Haggadot. So numbers that were previously correct are now not. But what I said is that the 50,000 that we speak about them are some kind of unique or rare. I mean, it's not just a regular Agadot. The earliest illustrated Haggadah that we have, it's the Wolf Haggadah. It's from the beginning of 14, around the 1450, was written in French, and I will describe a little bit of that story when I will share some slides of this Haggadot and their story.
Fantastic. Um, David, as we heard from Chaim, the Haggadah has evolved in so many different ways over centuries, so many different kinds of Haggadot. How did you balance, working within tradition and also creating something new and modern that Chaim is referring to? How did you balance that kind of work?
Um, Thank you, Adina. That's a great question. And I think the best way to answer it is with a couple of examples. Um, I'll start with the famous Bird's Head Haggadah from Germany. About the year 1300, it's currently in the Israel Museum. And you'll see that the Jews are depicted as birds. There's a lot of controversy and questions and scholarly opinions what could be about, but it's very famous in Jewish art. Some of them have the hat of shame that the Jews were forced to wear. Here you see another picture of them. So, based on that, very famous in Jewish art, I quoted these strange Jewish bird creatures, characters, gathered on a perch here on this page. On the opposite page, this is a right-hand page. On the opposite page, I made a very delicate, lacy paper cut page. When that page is turned, the bold opposite text is suddenly revealed. We were slaves to Pharaoh in Egypt. And suddenly, the bird Jews have lost their freedom and are trapped in the paper cut cage. The text then continues with the evocative phrase, and if God had not redeemed us from Egypt. And that kind of rang in my ears, just that part of the phrase. And it occurred to me that probably our own generation, more than any other in Jewish history, understands what can happen when redemption does not come. So I made the little door of the cage to suggest the gates of Auschwitz, whose inscription cynically echoes the themes of Passover: Arbeit, work, service, avodah, and freedom, Cherut, Freiheit. So these pages draw simultaneously upon imagery from the 13th and 20th centuries and hint at the extraordinary flourishing of the rich German Jewish cultural synthesis that was so important. Another reference to German Haggadot comes at the Kiddush, the sanctification over the wine, and particularly the order of the five blessings for Saturday night when the blessings for Kiddush and Havdalah are combined. Already in the Talmud, there is a difference of opinion about the order of these blessings, and the accepted opinion is given with an acronym helpful for remembering the order. Yayin, Yud, Kuf, Kiddush, Ner, Nun, Havdalah, He, Zman, the beginning of each of these three letters. Now, Yak and Has has no meaning in Hebrew and Aramaic, but at some point, a witty medieval German Jew punned it into German as Jag den Has, which means in German, hunt the hare. And indeed, for hundreds of years, hare hunts bizarrely came to be depicted across from Kiddush in almost every early German Haggadah. If you don't know this intricate pun and acronym, it makes no sense. And a manuscript example, an example from a printed Haggadah, early printed Haggadah. Now, a clever pun is good for a generation or two, but I assumed that the immense popularity of this image had to reflect something different and deeper. I concluded that these Jews must have somehow seen themselves as being hunted rabbits, often at the mercy of their well-armed neighbors. And at one point, my thinking shifted about them from human hunters to natural predators of the hares, the eagle. And I was surprised to discover that historically, many realms that persecuted the Jews used the eagle symbol in their coats of arms or coins. And I collected them here on this page. Opposite the Kiddush, and I added the hair element myself on each element. Now, the Mishnah states that one must end the telling of the tale of the Exodus with the long blessing of redemption. But the language it uses is that it must be sealed with redemption, chotem b'geula. So I took this literally and had an impression made by the Israel Museum of an original First Temple Hebrew seal that was once owned by a Jew named Shalom or Shalem. There's the impression of the First Temple seal. And I placed it as the final sealing of the long blessing of redemption, Ga'al Yisrael. Here you see the bottom of the page, and here you see the full page. Within the text of the blessing itself, I also incorporated an enlargement of the same seal made entirely out of the smallest macrographic writing in the book, shaded to capture the impression of the embossed seal. Here you see an enlargement of the same seal made out of tiny micrographic writing. I'll stop sharing now.
I
And
have to ask you, how did you possibly make that tiny micrographic writing there, and how long did it take you?
no idea how long it took me. I have no concept of time or numbers. I'm number challenged. It's done with a turkey feather and cut the same way as a bigger quill, but just a very tiny one. It's the one place that I did use magnification while I was writing it in the book. I use micrography throughout the book. It's probably one of the only unique Jewish art forms there is, using tiny writing to form images. Goes back at least 1,000 years.
It's fantastic and so magnificent. I'm thinking about, as we all do, our obligation each year when we retell the story of the Exodus, and we're have obligated to have this feeling as if we ourselves have left Egypt. Haim, can you share with us how this obligation has manifested itself in other Haggadot over time? And then, David, I'd like to hear sort of a response from you and shedding more light on how you artistically help the reader fulfill this obligation. Chaim?
Yes, so I um I will start, if I may, with the image of our table of the Haggadah table in the permanent exhibition. This is one of the sections that is dedicated to Haggadot. These are the more traditional Haggadot, but we have also a space that is dedicated to non-traditional Haggadot, and but now again, unfortunately, we had to take all these beautiful Haggadot, which if you can follow my so here is the Rothschild Haggadah and the Worms Haggadah, and here the printed Haggadot. So this just to give some example of like we say the part of what we present in the collection. So like you said, Adina, one of the, I think, most known probably sentence from the Haggadah is that of Bechol dor vador, in every generation and generation, Chayav Adam lirot et atzmo, a person should see himself or as he himself got out of Egypt, כאילו הוא יצא ממצרים. Now there is a very interesting story to this sentence, because if you will ask most rabbis, scholars, people that know, they will tell you that this sentence it's actually taken from the Mishnah in Masechet Psachim, where the other texts in this page are taken from. And if you will open a printed Mishnah today, you will find this sentence, Bechol dor vador, in every generation. But if you will take a look into the manuscript tradition of the Mishnah, you will find that in almost none of the manuscript tradition of the Mishnah, this sentence of Bechol dor vador exists. So what we can see or maybe think about, that sentence got to the Mishnah from the Haggadah and not the vice versa. The Haggadah that we see, and that also, I think in my perspective, it means how much power the Haggadah is the story that every person tells, or the popularity of this text, and that it's part of every house. It's not just in the shul that only men used to go, but it's something that it's so much deeper into the family. So it's actually shaped the Mishnah even, and not vice versa. The Haggadah that we see in front of us, it's the Wolf Haggadah, 14th century. The scribe was a French physician and scholar, Yaakov ben Shlomo. One of, it's not in this page, although we can see here a person holding the wine and so on the left side, but he wrote his Haggadah right after he lost, I think, all his family to the Black Death. And actually, the way, so he still writes his Haggadah, he still work on feeling redemption, but when he speaks about the flag of the devil that people just died, he's actually expressed his identification with the Egyptian. He said, I know what is to be somehow in this situation when people are dying from a disease around you. So it's not what we will assume Bechol Dor Vador, but it's another way to see Bechol Dor Vador. The War of Haggadah by itself, I will not go deep into that story, but disappear, confiscated by the Nazis, and then the entire process of how it got eventually to the National Library, it's a story of, by itself, Galut veGeula, exile and redemption. I will now move to another famous Haggadah of the National Library collection. This is the Rothschild Haggadah. The Rothschild Haggadah, we knew that it was part of the Rothschild collection before the Holocaust. Then it was disappeared. It was rediscovered by a scholar in Yale, and then restituted and brought back to the Rothschild family, who donated the Haggadah to the National Library. A few years after most of the Haggadah was returned to the library, two additional pages of that Haggadah appears on an auction and were both anonymously and again donated to the National Library. Now, what we see here again is the Maror, and we can see somehow the Pesach. Now, if you look on the images or the way in which the people are dressed, you can see that they are dressed in Italian dress. Now, traditionally, people thought to themselves, this is naive artists, okay? They don't have historical sense to maybe understand that in the land of Israel or in whatever, in Egypt, people are dressed differently. So they dress them up in Italian dress. But the actual story is the vice versa. They wanted to that the people that read this Haggadah will feel part of the Bechol Dor Vador, that they will see themselves inside the pages of the Haggadah. So therefore, they could draw Egyptian images or others, but they choose actually to help or bring in the people who read that Haggadah to feel part of the Haggadah. I will just bring in, and this is maybe the last, it's clearly not traditional Haggadah, that take that sentence, but here it's a Haggadah that was written in one of the kibbutzim, and then the Bechol Dor Vador, it's bring in the story of redemption, V'samti et Gvulcha, on the land of Israel, piece, part of the book from the Torah, Dvarim, about the land of Israel. So there we have also the Bechol Dor Vador of this side, not just the exile, but also the redemption. One of the things that I saw, and this is what I meant when I say that I see in David's Haggadah not just art or aesthetic, but also a very powerful interpretation, is the way in which he takes the Bechol Dor Vador and put it forward. Now, it's hard to see in the image here, but you have to come to see the real Haggadah by yourself. But the gray areas are actual mirrors. Um, Now they function, and David will explain better than me, they function in two ways. First, if you see many Jews. David spoke about the kibbutz galuyot. So all of us may find our ancestors and so on in these images. It's not just the Italian Jews that we saw in one Haggadah, but here we have many faces, many different images of Jewish people. If you close the pages so they each can look at in the mirror and see himself, but also the reader goes and he look at the mirror and he see himself in the Haggadah, in David's Haggadah. In my opinion, is such a powerful statement that what is the meaning of to see himself that a person should see himself as he got out of Egypt. I will just say final note that Maimonides have a different version. He's not saying a person should see himself, but he should act as if got out of Egypt. Therefore, we have entire tradition in the more Sephardi communities, but also our Seder, but in the Sephardi communities, that there is actual play in which we play how we got out of Egypt. People take, my wife is of Persian origins, so people take things on their back and walking. Okay, it's not just to be written. It's not to be read. It's actually to feel the experience of getting out of Egypt.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Chaim, for that information. And David, I want you to, comment on that and how you, of course, through the mirrors and other ways in the Haggadah, how you interpreted this obligation to see ourselves in the story.
Okay, Chaim really beautifully gave an introduction to it, so I'll run through it pretty quickly. But here's the phrase: in each and every generation, we must see ourselves as if we came out of Egypt. Um, and in doing some of my research, I found a couple Haggadot where, look on the left, you see there's a little guy actually looking in a mirror at himself, and I thought, you know, how charming. That's great. Okay, how can I take that further, that notion of the mirror, which is the time when we see ourselves? So I did a lot of research and found how Jews actually dressed b'chol dor v'dor. Each one of these images is a Jew from a different generation across history and across lands. The women on the left, the men on the right. And as Chaim mentioned, here you see details. The mirrors are placed in between. And as you open it, you see that if you're looking into the book, you see the reflection of the Jew opposite. Here they're mirroring each other as we're opening the book further and further. The process has three stages. When the book is closed, each generation is seeing itself. As we open the book, we see them seeing themselves. And when the book is open, we actually see ourselves, our own face reflected among all the generations of Jewish history. Educators especially love these pages because as long as the book is closed, the Jews just stare at themselves forever. Only when the book is open do we become part of the story.
That's great. David, you let's move into talking a little bit about the journey of this book, um, and how it came to Jerusalem. I want to note the part that I know about, which is that in 2024, thanks to I'm sorry, to Bob and Trudy Gottesman, who bought this book for the library. Bob and Trudy made it happen for us, and we have the privilege of holding this book, preserving it, and sharing it, and bringing it to the community. In your mind, I know there were references, and in this process of creating this book, you in your own personal life were going through your own journey to Jerusalem, or thinking about it, and I wanted you to share that and how it influenced your work.
Sure. Well, as I completed the manuscript in Jerusalem, I was very aware that this book was about to be delivered to the diaspora. But I so wished and somehow even knew that it would eventually return to Israel. I included two prayers for its return, one textual and one visual. The first full opening of the book is based on the fact that the night of Seder and that of the 9th of Av, Tisha B'Av, are always on the same day of the week. Passover commemorates our journey from exile to the land of Israel, and on Tisha B'Av we mourn our forced expulsion from Jerusalem into exile. To mark this polarity, I included one of the traditional lamentations for Tisha B'Av that poignantly contrasts in the first person my joy of leaving Egypt with my sorrow of leaving Jerusalem. The poem is written out on 2 pages, but in the very first spaces, I added a couple verses in which I allowed my Haggadah itself to speak in the upper right-hand corner. It says, "In Zion, my birthplace, I began to retell the departure from Egypt. To the diaspora I was exiled. Unwillingly I went when I left Jerusalem. The order of my sojourns, please list on my pages, as at the exodus from Egypt. Just to return is now my prayer with all the books of Israel to my city, to Jerusalem." This was written 40 years ago. These 2 pages also include a calendar for what day of the week Passover and Tisha B'Av will fall each year from when I completed it until the Jewish year 6000. Across from each year, I left a space for the owners to fill in the name of the place the Haggadah was that year until it returns to Jerusalem. The other reference is near the end of the Seder, where the final blessing after the wine is said. There are 2 variants to this blessing. On wine from the diaspora, we bless the land and the fruit of the vine. And for wine from Israel, we bless the land and the fruit of her vine. I made a tiny book with a turning page showing both versions. Gafna HaGeffen. When the book left Jerusalem 40 years ago, I gently attached the page to display the diaspora version. At the beautiful dedication of the Haggadah at the National Library a year and a half ago, I finished my remarks by asking the wonderful, generous donors, Trudy Elbaum Gottesman and Bob Gottesman, to finally open and turn the little page to reveal the golden letter Hey of the Israel version that had been waiting so many years.
That's incredible.
At the time I originally inserted these two assertions of confidence that someday my Haggadah would return to Israel were more statements of faith and confidence than prediction. But looking back now, I do find it remarkable that the placement of these two prayers corresponded exactly to the only two places that I explicitly used the book motif in my Haggadah. I sensed the book had to and would somehow return someday. But the Haggadah itself seemed uncannily to know that it must return to join the greatest collection of books of the Jewish people ever assembled, the remarkable new National Library of Israel.
Thank you, David. It's an honor to have the Haggadah in our collection. I want to just go to my last question and then turn to the many, many questions that our very active listeners in the audience have posed, some of them at least, and just ask both of you your final thoughts on as we approach Pesach, how you hope or see the Moss Haggadah might inspire those who have the privilege of having a copy of this Haggadah, or those that don't have it but are inspired and could be inspired by these words today and are inspired by them, how we could incorporate your thoughts about this special Haggadah into our own Seders that we are beginning to plan for. I'll start with you, David.
Okay, well, as you said, the Haggadah manuscript has been printed in 3 editions. And it was very important to me that each one of these be accompanied by my reflections on the work. So for each artistic section, I wrote an article about the sources, ideas, and how I worked these out artistically. The way people tend to use the Haggadah is to pick a page or two in advance each year, study my notes with the art, and present it to their group Seder. You've probably gotten a little taste of this in my comments on the images that I presented today. My hope is that this combination of the visual and the verbal sharing of the ideas behind the images can give added depth and meaning to each part of the Seder. But for all of you, though, I can offer a little supplement to your own Seder. When the world was first closing down from COVID, I realized that people's usual large, lively Seders may not be possible. I quickly designed 15 little folders, one for each step of the Seder. Each distills a topic or value for one step, offers discussion questions, and a little written meditation and collage for each one. I called them the Siman Tov Seder, and they are available to download for free from my publisher Beit Alpha Editions. My Pesach gift to you.
We can send that link to everyone who's registered so that they'll have access to that. That's
Right.
fantastic. Chaim, what's your thinking on what we can take and bring into our into around our Seder tables?
So many things can be taken, but again, we are in a unique time in history. I told my friends that when my kids grew up, I thought to myself, what kind of history they will tell? They have a good life. Nothing happened. I mean, maybe compared to what I remember myself from young years, sitting in, when it was the Iraqi war, and other. And David mentioned COVID, and yeah, 5 years ago, our life were changed, and since then, October 7th, and we are long going in this complicated and very um, uh, this very time. And yeah, my kids will have, Bezrat Hashem, what to tell to their grandchildren because the story that they were sit in the shelters and so on, I guess they will never forget. And what I think I find in David Sagada is, and this is what I take with me, that we sometimes think that when we start one journey or when we start redemption, is we are now just on the steps up and there will be no maybe there will be some difficulties, but there are smaller difficulties. And here we see that the story of Galut and Geulah, redemption and um, difficulties are actually together. So we can live in a time of feeling lucky, but at the same time to be worried. And I think that this is part of when what I saw now in the Haggadah. This is part of the thing that I will take to myself. I have also a dream, and David knows that dream. And maybe one day we can fulfill it, and to introduce David Zagada more to the Israeli public. And because I think that even without his notes, but of course with his notes it's much better. But to try maybe to find a way to also make this Agada available to the public and to introduce especially the Israeli public, people who read Agada, who read Seder, but to this very creative and amazing work and to help also people like myself who don't have the facsimile or the highest edition to sit with their kids and to open their eyes, open their ways to think different on the Agada, on the Seder, and on the relations between us to Jews around the world, around the globe, in the past and today.
Thank you. All right, let's turn to a couple questions. We only have a few more minutes before 2 o'clock, but we'll go a few minutes over, not much. Okay, David, what, if you can, is there a certain part of the Haggadah after you completed all of this beautiful work that is your favorite, that speaks to you the most? Does it change over time, a portion that stands out to you? Can you speak to uh, what's the part you feel most connected to in this Haggadah?
Is the next question going to be which is my favorite child? I think that answers it. No, I really, each section was so much of an act of devotion and research and each one has its own character and its own thing. So I really honestly don't play favorites with this book.
I hear you. Um, Someone noted that when you did the imagery of the order of the Seder, of the set table, that it looked like it was reminiscent of a Kabbalistic tree of life. Did that come into your mind, or was that just some,
Uh,
but
not
the
not
person,
not on that page, no. Uh, no.
Okay. Um, can you tell us, David, what was written on each of the maps in the diaspora communities that you showed? Um, and did you have help with the various languages? How did you research and write this yourself?
So the texts are the place in the Seder is where we open the door and say Shvach Hamatcha, pour out your wrath. And that is a fairly late addition to the Seder, to the Haggadah, but very universal. And because it's fairly late, there are different versions of it for different communities. Um, so what I did was I again just sitting in the library and finding the different languages, Haggadot from all the different lands, and transcribing their own Jewish languages, how for that particular text for their nusach, for their version.
Someone commented, and we covered this a little bit, but you can maybe emphasize this point. They asked, why are the Jews leaving Egypt in modern dress, in modern clothes? And you have very different styles in the Haggadah. Can you speak to this diversity of people that are in the Haggadah and how you see everything coming together?
Well, I think Chaim alluded to that, in his talk about, it's important that it's not a story of thousands of years ago, but it's a current story of who we are and where we are, and that's the Beholder Vador. We see ourselves in the story and the story in us.
Going back to the origin of the Haggadah, can you talk a little bit more about how far in advance you planned everything? And did you see this in its entirety? How did you develop it incrementally, if that was the case? Just give us a little bit more flavor there. You talked about it in the beginning of the talk a little bit.
Um, so that it's a great question, and the answer is that I had no idea what it was going to be at any point along the way. It was full of surprises. The process was it started with just research. I spent 6 months just in the libraries in three continents, eventually studying the traditional development of the Haggadah text, the traditional commentaries to the Haggadah, and the art history of the medieval Haggadah, and just immersing myself in it for 6 months deliberately, not doing any drawings or any ideas, just immersing myself in these traditions. Then I began page by page with my notes from my research and looked at each section, tried to find what was interesting and new and fresh and a new insight into that part of the text, and then trying to figure out an artistic way to express that notion or idea, page by page as I went through. Um, there's not huge uniformity in the book. There are a lot of different styles, a lot of different artistic traditions. So because it is my working through the book, um, section by section, page by page.
Haim, I have a question for you. Um, what's the first printed Haggadah? And what would you say, besides the Moss Haggadah in our collection, is the most interesting? Again, this might be a favorite child question, probably is. What's the, most interesting Haggadah in your opinion in our collection and the earliest one that we have? These are questions from Michael Jesselson, who, by the way, sends his regards to you and his love, David. Chaim, can you answer
Thanks,
those
Michael.
questions?
So the earliest printed Haggadah that we have is the Haggadah that was printed in Spain before the expulsion by Rabbi Shlomo Elkabetz, who is the grandfather of Rabbi Shlomo Elkabetz that wrote the poem Lecha Dodi. This surviving, not many people know, but in Spain, before the expulsion, there was beginning of Jewish print with its own way and its own tradition. It's all stopped after the expulsion, and some of the printers actually moved to Constantinople and started some of the prints again. But this now it's a very, very, very simple Haggadah. Um, no decorations, no. But if you ask me if it's my favorite, so I will say that it's a favorite in the sense that you understand that you see when you look at this Haggadah, you understand the revolutionary idea of this man that actually printed this Haggadah. And understanding, we know from the past, we have in the scholars that tells us that people did not have Haggadah. There used to be someone with one Haggadah who went from house to house. In some places, people wanted to sleep until he finished reading in other places. So, um, but printing the Haggadah, making the Haggadah the book that we know today, that we all sit and we have the Haggadah in front of us. This is amazing way of thinking how to popularize the Jewish story. And since then, we up until 1960, we have more than 4,000 different editions of Haggadot. Since the 1960s, we don't count anymore. But it's one of the most printed book, and actually there is interesting intersection or connection between some of the artists that are working in 17th century and 18th century. They are actually copying the printed Haggadot. They try to imitate the printed Haggadot and to decorate them. So, in different than other, I mean, since we printed the Siddur, you barely find any handwritten Siddurim. You find here and there in Yemen, they still write down, but the Haggadah, and this is also maybe part of the Bechol Dor Vador, still people wrote it for themselves. Some wanted it after it was popularized and printed. Some wanted it maybe more unique, more decorated. So they actually went to a scribe and asked, do something unique for me. Some play with that, and it's one of the only books that we still that what David is doing in a sense, it's also living tradition of that book, that it there are scribes and there are print and they are living together even nowadays.
I think that's where we are going to conclude. I will say that we've seen today that the Jewish story, as you said, Chaim, continues to be renewed in every generation. I mean, there's nothing like the renewal, David, that you gave to this story through your art. And works like your Haggadah remind us that our texts, our traditions, our creativity are not only preserved at the library, but they continue to inspire us to give new meaning and connection to all of us today. So thank you, David and Chaim, for this very illuminating conversation. And thank you all for joining us today, for being part of the library's community. I do want to say that given the unusual time that we're in right now, and the challenge during wartime that the library is facing due to its closure during the war, I'm actually going to give you an opportunity to help the library, to join us in supporting the library at this time if you're in a position to be able to do so. And with that, I'm going to wish all of you a Chag Kasher v'Sameach, and all of us more peaceful days ahead in Israel, in the United States, and throughout the world. Thank you all very, very much, especially you, David and Chaim.
Thanks, Adina. Great chatting. Chaim, pleasure always.
Pleasure and Chag Kasher v'Sameach
To all.
to
We'll
all.
leave this on for just another minute for those of you that want to scan the code or to take down the website to support the library. Thank you all very, very much. And I hope to see you all, you, David and Chaim, in Jerusalem in happier times. I do want to note, for those of you that are still on, that we will be sending a follow-up email that will include the recording. It will include a link to descriptions of some of our Haggadot that we have on our website, and it will include the information that David shared with us that we could use during our Seder preparation as well, and hopefully a link as to where we might find and be able to purchase the Haggadah.
Thanks so much. For those of you who might not get it, it's Beta Alpha Editions in California is the distributor and publisher of all my works, Beta Alpha Editions. But Adina will send that to you.